Welcome to the Heal, Thrive, Dream podcast, where trauma survivors become healthy thrivers. Each month, we'll feature a theme in the trauma recovery and empowerment field. To promote your recovery, healing, and learning how to build dreams, here's your host, Karen Robinson, transformational coach and therapist.
Welcome back, everyone. Good afternoon. Today, I have a guest with me who won't make you anxious. So my last guest, I introduced her as being cool because I got a little tired of saying, oh, I have a very special guest. I'm excited because everybody says that when they introduce people. So today I gotta find a different word. What word best describes you, Erin?
Calm.
Calm?
Uh-huh.
All right. So today my guest is calm. Her name is Erin McCullough. Erin is an on-demand or in-demand speaker and an international teacher on how to overcome and prevent anxiety. She also has specialization in mind-body work and has a focus on joy. So Erin, what about your bio would you like to expound upon? I know I did a down and dirty version. What else would you like to say about yourself?
Well, I just like to say that I work with anybody who's seeking, who is on the road to finding meaning and purpose in their life and living an impenetrable experience, internal experience of joy. Most of the people that I meet, their experience is a roller coaster ride, right? Every emotion, every person, circumstance, they're in reaction to. And what I do is I teach people how to not be in reaction and to understand what those emotions are, what they're signaling versus thinking that they are those emotions. And then we talk about things like thoughts. What are thoughts creating in our lives? Where are we responsible for those things? And through that process of understanding our thoughts and our emotions, then you can begin to unpack all of the, story and trauma behind the things that have happened in your life and recognize that they really aren't actually who you are. They're just experiences that you had.
Oh, that was really nicely said. Awesome.
Thanks.
How did you get to this place that this is your life's work? What happened that you got there?
Oh gosh. Well, I'll try to be succinct. As you know, it's a journey. It's not a sprint. It's a marathon, this life. But I think it started well beyond this. But what sort of was the pinnacle to starting on this path was I had an anxiety disorder. And it had me holed up in my home for nearly a year. And it started with the counseling process that I was going through. And through that process, it's not just that I all of a sudden couldn't go out of my home. It was, a series of things that happened slowly, like the narrowing of my life began with, I was training for a race at the time. I stopped running because I had a panic attack while I was running. And I was worried that I was going to, pass out on the side of the road and people would just walk by and go, oh, that's like a homeless person or something. So that got narrow. And then I was afraid at the time I was teaching a special ed high school students. And I thought I was going to pass out in front of the classroom and I didn't want to traumatize them. My point is that you don't just get to a place where you're in crisis. It happens slowly, but you don't recognize the pieces. So anyway, through that process, I had the anxiety disorder. And because the anxiety took over, I was no longer able to do the counseling work. And my counselor had recommended that I go to a psychiatrist. And I have a degree in psychology, so I knew that meant medication, and I'm pretty anti that. Not to say that it's not for other people. I've just always sort of been that way because I believe that the body can heal itself. And so anyway, so I went to the psychiatrist and I was able to get some resolution on the chemical side, but that doesn't change the stuff that's going on in the mind, right? So while I was able to do the chemical side, get that all balanced out so I didn't have the symptoms so much, what I recognized is that it was part of my personality. And I figured out why the anxiety disorder started. It was through that talk therapy process of the subconscious mind's inability to recognize what is actually happening at the moment, or what the recall of something else that's happened. So what that does is every time you say the story, your story of all the bad things that have happened, when you say that story over and over again, your mind body has that experience over and over again. And that's what threw me into the anxiety disorder. So that took me about a decade to figure out. And in the meantime, I had all of the things. It's just like any sort of addiction, where you can stop the alcohol or the drugs or whatever, but the behaviors that led to it are still there. And so I sort of had to unpack and rewire and understand, what was it about me and the story that I was identifying with that created this whole thing. And so I did about 10 years of work in just trying to figure that whole piece out and like recognize myself and find some strategies that I could, calm myself down and have less anxiety. And those were all great until about almost 4 years ago, I was going through a divorce, and it just threw me for a loop. I was just in a bad place. And I picked up this book that other people had recommended, and it was called, I don't know, I can never remember the name of it. I'll remember it. Anyway, it's 365 passages. It's meant to be done over a year. So you do one passage a day per year. And I did it for about 2 months. And in the 2 months, I had this experience where every time I opened up the book and I started reading, it was like these words were in bold and sort of lifting off the page. They were like, you are meant to be in joy. The path is joy. And I was like, after 2 months of that, and I haven't looked back at it. I have no idea if even those words are in that book. I just know that that's
joy.
obviously what I was supposed to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, and in my mind, I was thinking, well, that's all well and good, but I don't know how to get there. I don't know how to get to joy. And then as, this universe provides, I had an email come into my inbox from a gentleman I had met years ago through a seminar company that I worked with. And he was having a seminar, and I didn't even look at what the seminar was about. I was like, I just need something positive to go to. And I knew he would deliver. And I went. And as it turned out, it was a day-long seminar on the visualization process that he teaches. And I was so amped up after going to that I came home and I started enacting this visualization, and my entire life just lined up. I went a month later and trained under him directly to teach his seminars. And I came home and I put on my first seminar, and I had everything written out that I was going to say, and it comes with a workbook and everything. And I stood up in front of the class, and 5 minutes in, I ditched my notes, and it was like I was just getting this huge download of everything that I had ever done in my life at that moment. And I went, oh, this is my purpose. I'm meant to teach people how to live their best life, how to discover what's stopping them from living their best life so that they can. And so that's what happened.
Well, who was the instructor that you trained under?
His name is Mike Dooley. He was in The Secret, and he wrote the book Infinite Possibilities. Yeah, and he has
I get his
notes from the universe.
Yeah. Every morning I get his I love him.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Oh, that's cool. I had no idea. You didn't mention that before.
Yeah. Partly because, so I taught his seminars for 3 years, and the feedback I kept getting from people who were attending were, that's really great that you're teaching his seminar, but more than 50% of what you're telling us is not in this workbook. So you might want to consider writing your own seminar. So I did. So I don't teach his seminar anymore, and it's super valuable. Mine has a lot of some similar content, but it goes a little bit deeper into some different areas that he doesn't. Just different, not better or worse.
No, but that just makes sense. Like we're meant to have mentors so we can go on and do our own work, and so somebody someday is going to come to your seminar and then they're going to adopt it to be their own work, and it won't be better. It'll just be different, like you're saying.
Well, and I'll say that one of the things I just loved about Mike was that, none of his stuff was proprietary, because he would always tell us, I cannot reach everybody. You're going to reach the people that can hear it from you. And this material means that much to me that I don't need to. It doesn't need to be proprietary to me. I just need this word to get out as much as possible.
Yeah,
and that's how I feel too.
Yeah, that's just so authentic, isn't it? It's like, yeah, that's really beautiful. Yeah. Thanks. So you mentioned before we started today that you're working on a book. Are you up for talking about that?
Absolutely. It's, it's a lot of the same things. The working title at the moment is Impenetrable Joy, a guide to calm, peace of mind, and meaning. And my intention behind the book is kind of what I was just talking about, which is understanding, the process that how to create consciousness in this world that seems very chaotic. Some real manual step-by-step guide to what's actually going on here and how can I manage this in a way where I can actually enjoy myself. I believe our birthright is to be in joy almost exclusively. And I don't know very many people besides myself that live in that place. So I certainly
a lot of us want to.
Yeah, I think they do. I'm unclear. I mean, I think that most people don't think it's possible. Mm. We don't have a lot of role models in that whole,
well, they also may have evidence of life being pretty shitty at times. If they're a trauma survivor, been abused, that if that's your experience, you might have this irrational belief that you deserve nothing but suffering. And it takes a process or some kind of essence to kind of show you something different,
Well, maybe this conversation can be that. When I work with clients, the very first thing I say is, tell me your story, right? Mm-hmm. And is it butterflies and sunshine and rainbows? Absolutely not. Right? I mean, it's all the things.
Or they wouldn't need to, right?
Right. And everybody has a story. It's not exclusive to a group of people, right? It's just some people have different mechanisms to sort of work out some things, but most people actually don't. And so the first thing I tell them is, tell me your story. And then the next thing I tell them is, you don't get to tell that story anymore, ever again. Mm-hmm. Not because it's disrespectful to the people that were there. I mean, often it's about family members and situations that happened with them. But the thing is you are not your story. Right. That is just a thing that happened to you. The essence of who you are, your spirit, your soul, that is deeper than that story. That story is meant for you to evolve from, but it's not meant for you to continually live in pain over. And so when we start with the story, then we get rid of the story. So then I say, you're not allowed to talk about it again. Every time you think about it, I want you to focus on something that brings you joy immediately upon recognizing that that story is running. So whatever that, and the reason I do that is because of that subconscious mind thing I was talking about earlier, which is when we tell the story, then we relate to it without even knowing, right? It's just habit. So, and then the third thing is you're not allowed to get into a relationship with people over that story. So if somebody says, oh, when I was a kid, my father was an alcoholic and he was abusive, and is your story, you're not allowed to talk about it, because getting into a relationship with people over your story is not a good way to start a relationship.
I think they teach that in AA.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I have been to AA meetings before because I had friends that were in the program. But I don't know very little bit about that. But there are definitely some things about AA that I do know that I think are fantastic, and part of it's as though we're addicted to our story, right? Without awareness, right? That's the piece. It's not a judgment. It's not a blame or shame kind of a thing. It's just we don't recognize that it's possible to live without the story and still have relationships with the people that are involved in that trauma, but you can have it in a different way. And when you can heal that part of you, then you can heal that story, and the story becomes further and further away from you, so that it no longer, like if you ask me about my story, I would have a really difficult time coming up with all the things, right? All the things that happened as a child and all those things, because it is so distant to me now that it almost seems like it happened to somebody else. And that's not, again, not in a disrespectful way. It's just, it doesn't serve to keep referring to that story, because you're bigger than that story. You're better than that story. You are the essence, the spirit of who you are. Your soul is kind and loving and all-knowing and all of those wonderful things that you think is possible. Mm-hmm. That's who you actually are. It's just covered up by all this other stuff. And so when we can get rid of the story, that's like the first battle.
It's kind of like getting the mud off of you.
Absolutely.
It's a cleansing process. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you can separate yourself from the story, you can see it for what it is. I tell people all the time, it's really difficult to read the ingredients inside of the jar. So if you're inside the jar and you're trying to read the ingredients, the label on the outside, it's pretty hard. And so it's really hard to understand what's actually going on for ourselves, at least initially. But then when you do, that's the reason that I'm writing this book, is because I want to help people navigate how to recognize what's actually going on. And then when you have the awareness piece, you can put these strategies into place as you become aware. And that's really the process. That's what this is. It's spiritual development. That's why we're here, is to have this evolution. And when we can find a strategic way to do it so that we understand what's going on, then we don't have to have all those other feelings like blame and shame and not good enough and all the things that we all picked up and is part of the human experience.
Right. And lead to the anxiety that we can get.
Yeah. Anxiety, my definition of anxiety is needing to control everybody and everything. So that's the all external environment. The inability to do that, and the recognition that you can't, even though you continue to do it, right? Mm-hmm. And that's everybody's experience. You can call it anxiety. You can call it stress. You can call it overwhelm, worry, depression, sadness. All of those things is that same thing, which is trying to control the external environment to make your internal environment feel good. And I'm asking you to look internal and create internally the environment that you want, so that it doesn't matter what's going on in the exterior.
Yes. Oh, that's beautiful. But it's so much easier to say than to do. So what?
Okay, so it is. Oh, say again.
What is it about your approach that makes that easier for people?
Well, here's the thing. You've been practicing this way of doing things for a really long time, right? So I'm asking you, okay, so this is what I know. Change happens 3 ways, or it happens in 3 steps. One is awareness, is when you understand, like, this doesn't feel good. I don't want to do this anymore, right? Usually crisis, anxiety disorder, all the things.
You're tired of feeling crappy.
Yeah, just all low-level experiences, right? The second piece is some sort of strategy so that you can rework or rewire that whole thing, right? And the third piece is practice. Yes. So you practice this other way for all these years, you're going to need, so that's simple, right? I said 3 things, you understood those things. I didn't tell you the strategies, but we can talk about some of those. But you understood that that's 3, that's simple, right? Mm-hmm. Awareness, strategy, practice. Yeah. Simple, but not easy, right? Because it requires an intention. Like your intention has to be set that you are no longer willing to experience these other things anymore. And what's possible, right? You need to know what's possible. What do I believe is possible? Because if I don't believe that being in joy every day, all day long is possible, guess what? It's not happening, right? But the hardest part of those three things is the practice.
It really is. Just like
I
practicing for a
mean,
marathon.
yeah,
That's
you
the hardest
don't,
part.
it's like, and people think, oh, because what you do is so emotions are really our signal that something's being challenged. It's that out of control thing, right? Can't control all the things. Something's being challenged. I'm going to be angry about it, stressed out, overwhelmed, whatever, right? So when you decide to challenge that emotion by first recognizing where it is in your body, just so you can acknowledge that it exists. Usually it's, heart or throat. Sometimes it's your gut, right?
Mhm.
Then you have to take the deeper dive, which is to look at it very specifically and go, I'm going to decide that this is not okay to feel anymore
Ooh, yeah.
every single time it comes up. So do you think if I'm 50 years old, I was practicing this way for 40 something years, right? Do you think that if I challenge um, stress or anxiety or worry one time, this way I've been practicing for 40 years, it's going to go away one time? Absolutely not.
Right.
It is a practice of challenging, 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 right? And it sounds difficult. It's not complicated. It just requires that you begin to be aware of what are you thinking about when you're having an emotional response. Where is it in your body? And how can I change that by thinking something else that feels good? And just changing and changing and moment by moment every time it comes up. And guess what? After you challenge it so many times, I don't have a number for that. It depends on how deep it is. And
Person for
then
yeah.
each time you are shifting the energy to the other side and your brain and your body start to get on board with this new way. And eventually it becomes the new thing.
Yeah.
And that's exactly how you get over an addiction. It's the exact same thing. It's just that drug and alcohol addiction, sex, shopping, whatever the thing, workaholism, all of that, those are so obvious, right? This is less obvious, right? But it's signaled by your emotions. So whenever you're in reaction, you're triggering past belief systems that are wanting to be worked on, but you have to have the awareness. The strategy can be as simple as, I don't want to feel like that anymore. I'm going to choose this. And I'm going to keep choosing this, even if it feels wrong and bad and all the things, until I do feel that new way. Because the intention of the new way is actually stronger, but you got to give it some energy. You got to move it in that direction.
Right. Do you use any kind of mantras for that for yourself? I know it's one of my techniques.
I use a lot of mantras with my clients because most of them are entrepreneurs and we're crazy. We have crazy mind patterns of things. One that I would like to say is, or I like to tell people is, you have all the time in the world, right? As we know, that's not true. But the sensation that a lot of people get when they have anxiety and stress or they're overwhelmed is, I got this like huge to-do list of things to do and I got to get it done today. It's like, actually, no, you don't have to get it done today, like start to manage those emotions around, like, what are the expectations you have of yourself, so that you can navigate these things in a way that is more comforting and where you're able to get through them more smoothly. So the example I like to give is, So a lot of my clients are like, oh, I have all these things to do. They're like, huge projects. And, let's say like, I needed to get my taxes done. It's like, is that on your to-do list? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, that is not a to-do list item. It's not get your taxes done. That's too broad. That's so general and huge. Plus it already has negative on it too. It's like, this is like break down your life in a to-do list that makes baby steps like super easy, right? It's not, I have to get my taxes done as a to-do list item. It's, I need to get my bank statements together. Then I need to put in all my receipts, right? That's 1, 2, put on the receipts, right? 3, clean up the books. 4, spend time with my CPA, whatever that looks like, right? That's 4. That's not one thing. And that's why anxiety and overwhelm happen, is because we take large things and put them as a one thing. It's not a one thing. It's many, many steps to get done. So when you can break down your life into smaller bite-sized pieces, then the overwhelm and anxiety doesn't come in, because you can gather your bank statements. That could take like 5 minutes if it's online, right? So that's much easier to manage, the step by step, right? And so that's kind of what I'm asking you to do across the board, right? Is to quit generalizing everything into larger categories and really break down like what's happening here.
Yeah. Did you freeze on me?
No.
Okay. Okay. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that process. I think that can be really helpful. One of the things I find when I work with people who are intelligent is when they have a thought, they're like, well, I'm a smart person, so if I think this or thought it, it must be true. And I think it's really important for people to remember that our thoughts are not necessarily true, and it's very possible to believe in a different thought with the practice. Like, I live in joy, I live in joy, saying that over and over. One day you will wake up and you'll be living in joy, because it's almost like brainwashing yourself in a positive way, instead of the negative old tape, like you suck, you're worthless, you're stupid. It's that can be considered a brainwashing, because we play that tape over and over until we know better. So I think your work is showing people this is a better way to live. You can change the way you think, so you can change the way you feel. So
yeah, so those are the 2 tenets that I teach from. One is the dominant thoughts that you think is what create your reality. And the second part is taking personal responsibility for that. Because if what I said is true, the first part, then you would be responsible for the experience that you're having. And we all are. And listen, in terms of thoughts, like those are based on experiences we had. So I didn't talk about this piece, but there's between the ages of 0 to 5 or 8, it's sort of indisputed at the moment. We make up decisions about experiences that we had, and those we use unchallenged throughout our lives. You can imagine if you made up a decision about something at like 5 or 8 and you're middle aged, that certainly would be sort of inappropriate. But we don't challenge those things because nobody told us that that's something that we could do. So it's not your fault. And now you know better, because I'm about to tell you that you are responsible for your thoughts. Just like you are not your emotions, you're also not your thoughts. Yeah. And those thoughts are created from this young age to, initially they're created to, for your mind to, it's processing so much information, like to just kind of categorize everything, right? So it's like, I'm going to take in this information. If I put my hand on the stove and it gets burned, ow, that hurts. Not going to do that again, right? Makes perfect sense. Well, it doesn't make sense though when you begin to categorize people and circumstances, which is what our brain does. It just naturally does that. And then don't challenge those things, because people are very nuanced. I'll give you an example. My folks have been married for almost 40 years, and I asked them the other day, do either of you like surprise each other when you ask them a question and they come up with a different answer than you thought they would? And they were like, yeah, all the time. It's because we're so nuanced and we've had all these experiences to date that we can't know. Like we tell the stories to our significant others or our friends or family or whatever, the same stories, but there's all these nuances in the background that we don't talk about, but we do make decisions from. And so we can't know all those things. And so that complexity is going on for each person and in each situation. And yet we've categorized that person as conservative or a hippie or, woo-woo or whatever the categories that you have. And then we don't question them. And then when they surprise us by saying something that we're like, oh, I thought you were conservative and you just jumped out of an airplane, like that doesn't make sense, right? It's because of that process. So this is challenging that process, saying, okay, for the purposes of, not getting hurt, it makes sense not to do some of these things. But for the purposes of understanding and being in a relationship and communicating with others, it doesn't make sense to be so rigid in our thinking that we know if I do X, then Y happens. If I do X, then this person should act this way and this circumstance should be this way. But they aren't that way. But then we don't go back and go, oh, that's ineffective, right?
Right.
I did this was supposed to happen, and this person was supposed to behave like that, or that circumstance was supposed to happen. It didn't happen, which is 99% of the time. And yet I don't go back and go, that's faulty thinking. So you are in control of your thoughts. We just aren't taught to be in control. So that is the awareness piece. And so now I challenge you and your listeners to start to listen to what's going on up here.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening regularly? What are you saying to yourself? What are you saying about others? Like just hear, not in a judgment space at all, just what's going on. And then we can begin to unpack and navigate, what can I do moving forward to have a different experience if the experience I don't want to have keeps happening? And we all have, so we're all literally taking from our past and projecting into the future what we think is going to happen. And that's that process that I was just talking about. The projection doesn't happen, but we don't challenge it. And I'm asking you to challenge it. I'm asking you to say, hey, this doesn't feel good anymore. And I don't want to put people into categories like that. I want to understand what's actually happening, especially with those that are close to us. It's difficult to be in a relationship and have good communication with people if we're constantly telling them and projecting on them who we think they are versus allowing them to be who they are.
Yeah.
And when you allow others to be who they allow you to be who you are.
Ah, right. Exactly. So one of the questions I love asking my podcast guests is, what are you currently reading or studying, and how come?
So I will tell you, there are two people that I continue to study and learn from, and they are Eckhart Tolle and Gary Zukov.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I am listening to the audiobook Soul Stories. Gary Zukov is, both of them I listen to they're similar but a little bit different. Eckhart Tolle taught me how to become separate and neutral from everything that's going on outside of my internal experience, so that I could experience it as separate from me, as the spectator. That's the word I was looking for. So that I could become the spectator of my life versus thinking that I am my thoughts and my emotions.
So that
And
higher
Gary,
level view, like helicopter view.
mm-hmm. Just, yeah, in how it feels for me is I'm here and all this out here is separate from me. And I'm in charge of this inside here, and this out here can be however it needs to be. He taught me about stillness and neutrality and what that looks like. And Gary, and peace of mind and calmness. And Gary continues to teach me about how to unpack and navigate these emotions that tend to try and run our lives, and how to intentionally live your life knowing that you're going to be triggered by people or circumstances, and being able to recognize that so that you can again, be separate from it and really go in and do the internal deeper work so that you're no longer projecting your stuff on everybody else, which is what we do all day long, right? We project our hurts because we can only, you were talking about thoughts. We can only, our perception is based on our beliefs. And that's what we were talking about before, between 0 and 5 or 8, whatever. So that's the lens or the filter in which we see this world. And my lens and filter are different than yours because you had different experiences, are different than everybody else's. And yet we act as though we're all the same. Like, you should know when I give you a gift, you should say thank you. Just things like that, right? And that's my expectation. I gave you a gift, you should say thank you. That's my expectation. That's a minor expectation, but we have bigger ones, right? And we go into reaction into all of those. I mean, you really want to see somebody go into reaction, almost hit them with a car, pedestrian or a bicyclist. They'll wheel around and like start cussing at you, and right, because they've completely gone into reaction over, and I'm not saying that I get it. I've been there, but that's that process happening in quick time. It's like, you threatened my life, I'm going to go into reaction, and then I'm going to flip you off so that I feel better, right?
Because
so that's that whole but we do that all day long, every day. It just doesn't look that, it's not that quick, and it's not, maybe not as tumultuous, not as like in your face,
right.
But that's happening all day long, every day, because I have an expectation that you're not going to kill me when I'm on my bike. And I have an expectation that you're going to say thank you. And I have an expectation that your dog's not going to jump up on me. And I have an expectation that your kid's not going to be crazy or rude, or you're not going to be rude, or you're going to speak nicely to me or respect me, or all of those things, like all day long. But I don't live in that world anymore. So for me, it's a movie that's happening outside of myself all the time. And I'm watching people in it and their interactions with each other and going, oh, that's super interesting. They have a hurt there. I wonder if they're aware of that.
Yeah.
They have an issue with that there. I wonder if they're aware of that. And holding the space for people to tell me all of these very personal things, and help them navigate a new perspective on how can I not feel so awful all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I like when you said one of the first things you do when you work with people is ask them about their story. The reason I like that is I think, yes, people are often thinking about it, but I don't think everybody gives permission to hear it out and then offer to help them reprocess it in a way where they can find personal strength and learn how to overcome, have a different experience so that they can get to a healthier place. So that's really cool. So if someone wants to work with you further on learning your particular strategies of helping people, like, do you work with people that are overcoming anxiety and depression or trauma? I think you said everybody you're willing to work with. Is that right?
I am willing to work with anyone. I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, certainly. But I feel like I can help people. I mean, sometimes you do have chemical imbalances, and those need to be righted in order for you to do this deeper work.
Yeah, I agree.
And sometimes that requires that you get that chemical balance so that you can do that. But if it's to get the, the medication in order to, again, gloss over and not do the work, then that's challenging. But for me, I'm looking for those that are seeking, like they know on a deeper level that this life is supposed to have meaning and purpose, and they're floundering in what is my meaning and purpose? Like, how do I get to enjoying like this now part, right? Because we have no guarantee of anything beyond this moment. And if we truly believed that and lived our lives that way, we would live them very differently.
That's right.
We would be very much more dynamic. We'd be like, if we knew, I mean, when people find out that they have 6 months to live, what do? They start checking off their bucket list. I'm not saying go through that daily. What I'm saying is every day has joy in it. Glom onto that and connect those moments, because that is where it's at. Finding peace of mind, stopping all those thoughts. People who have anxiety and depression and sadness and stress and worry and overwhelm, that is an overthinking mind. When you work with me, I teach you strategies on clearing that out so you don't have to think incessantly. The answers are not in the thinking. That is just an exercise that creates all of that emotion. It's really in the stillness that answers come. It's not in that highly charged overthinking mind.
Yeah.
So anybody who wants to slow that down, slow down their life, try and find purpose and meaning and joy in it, like those are my people.
Sounds like I might need to move in. No, I've done a lot of work, but you definitely, a lot of people need that help, right? To first they have the awareness, like you said, but to also recognize you deserve to have peace and grace and a different experience. You
And it
deserve.
is possible. I
Yeah.
am living proof. I went from holding myself up to being, having to control all the things like diet and environment. And I used to wear my sunglasses all the time, just trying to control every stimulus. And now it's like, no longer. I don't have to be that. I am happy and calm and have peace of mind inside of myself all day, every day. And do I get triggered? Of course, things happen and I can recognize them immediately and push them out
Mhm.
and go, I don't need that. It's not this life. The purpose and meaning in this life is not based on the external things. It's not the car, the house, the relationship, any of those things. The relationship to nurture is the one with yourself. The soulmate is you. I like to say return to sender. Everything that you think is happening out here, where are you in that? Where are you co-creating that? Like, this is the relationship. This one here with me and you with you. That's it. And from there, beauty grows. It's amazing.
Uh, After hearing that description, who wouldn't want that? Erin, what's the
Well,
best
you'd
way?
be surprised.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. You have
Well,
to.
a lot of people are very, it's funny because the people that I love to work with are entrepreneurs, because I've been an entrepreneur for 20 years.
Mhm.
But some of them are the most stubborn too,
I know.
because
Mhm.
they are so focused on the external. How do I make my business successful? How do I get more leads? How do I get more sales? How do I fix my employees? And how
Also,
you
peer
do all of those things is return to sender, fix you, everything else lines up.
clothes. Yep. So if people are interested in working with you, what's the best way to reach you?
You can reach me. I love to engage on Instagram. I have a ton of content on there. DM me if you're interested in learning more. I will have some courses coming up online. You can work with me one-to-one. So my Instagram handle is Erin, Erin MacLLC, or you can find me on my website at erin-mac.com.
Awesome. Well, Erin, thank you so much for being here with us today. I think people that don't know that there's a different way to think and feel are really going to appreciate the time you spent with us today explaining that.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And these platforms are so important to really like get the word out that it is possible to be in joy now. It doesn't require anything, money, people, nothing. It just requires interest and seeking.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you for listening in today. Please join us next week, same day and time. Also, I would love for you to check out my website, healthrivedream.com.